I explored an old theatre, but the audience wasn't human. In Italy, I snuck into an abandoned theatre. As I walked on stage, the seats filled with shadowy figures, clapping silently. I ran, but the doors were locked. Now I hear applause in my dreams, and the figures are waiting for me to perform again. Comment your country, and I will make a scary story from your country.
True Crime Stories Episode 3, The Butcher of Plainfield. In the quiet town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, lived a man named Ed Gein, polite, soft-spoken, but hiding a horrifying secret. For years, people disappeared without a trace. When authorities investigated his farmhouse in 1957, they uncovered a nightmare. Furniture and clothing, crafted from human skin. Bowls made from skulls. Masks, stitched from real faces. Ed admitted to robbing graves, taking bodies to create things, inspired by a twisted obsession with his late mother. But it didn't stop there, he also took lives. His most infamous crime was the unaliving of a local shopkeeper, discovered in his shed, her body treated like one of his gruesome creations. The truth shook the town to its core. Ed was declared insane and spent the rest of his life in a mental institution. His house mysteriously burned down, but his story inspired horror films like Psycho and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Even today, his name sends shivers down the spine. Proof that sometimes, real life is scarier than fiction.
This is one of the most mysterious and terrifying crimes in German history. But it has also gained significant attention in the United States due to its eerie circumstances and chilling scenario. The story revolves around a murder at a rural house on the Hinterkaifeck farm, located in Bavaria, which was isolated and difficult to reach. In March 1922, 6 members of the Gruber family were brutally murdered on their isolated farm. What makes this case so terrifying is that the killers are believed to have stayed on the farm after the murders. Family members reported hearing strange noises from the attic, but no one could explain who was in the house or how the killers remained undetected. Even more bizarre, evidence suggested the killers hid in the attic, possibly waiting for the right moment to strike again. Though there were suspicions about a worker's involvement, the case was never solved and the killers were never caught. The family eventually left, and the farm became believed to be cursed. Why is this story so terrifying? The mysterious crime. The killer may have spent time with the victims without being detected. The isolated setting. The remote farm allowed the killer to escape or remain hidden, heightening fear. The lack of answers. The case remains unsolved, with only chilling theories.
However, the contents of the tape were far darker than what they could have imagined. Now, the original unedited video has never been made available online, but there are different pieces from various sources that I've done my best to put together. It opened with the camera pointed at a massive fire at night, with what I can only assume is the cameraman saying some ominous stuff.
Look at the fire. This is my domain. My hell.
A bit into the video, the camera refocused and the source of the fire became clear. It was a single-story home that looked like it was still under construction before it caught fire.
I call it home. My hell. The whole sky is black with smoke. A fire that I will destroy and burn your soul. Ancient spirit of evil.
Meanwhile, the cameraman kept talking, and the longer he spoke, the more unsettling it became. Later in the video, you could also hear fire trucks arriving at the scene, and the cameraman commenting on it before ending the video with a direct threat to the viewer.
Sometimes true for stranger than fiction. The case of Richard Trenton Chase is a story which even the most depraved horror writer would struggle to create. Over the course of 4 weeks spanned across 1977 and 1978, Richard Chase took the lives of 6 innocent victims in Sacramento, California. His murders gradually progressed in violence, beginning with drive-by shootings and culminating in acts of cannibalism.
Why are they hiding this evil part of history? In the 1950s, in the deep hills of Arizona, there was a young woman named Rosemary. She lived with her sick mother named Abigail Marsh in a crumbling old house. Rosemary was super tall and had a condition that made her look like a mummy. The townspeople feared her. One day her mother's health took a turn for the worse, and she passed out. Rosemary quickly called the local doctor, Dr. Rick O'Shea, crying and making weird noises as she couldn't talk. The doctor happened to know them and managed to get to the house quickly, but by the time he was there, Rosemary's mother was already gone. Dr. O'Shea tried everything to revive her, but it was too late. He broke the news to Rosemary, but she refused to believe him. In her eyes, the doctor had failed her. Worse, she believed he was the reason for her passing. As the doctor tried to leave, she cornered him. She didn't use words, just raw, terrifying strength. The townspeople would later find his car abandoned outside, but the doctor was never seen again. Days later, the people of the area noticed something strange. Rosemary was seen wandering the streets wearing the doctor's white coat. She walked with a creepy smile into the forest, never to be seen again.
Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka, known as the Ken and Barbie killers because of their good looks, shocked Canada in the early 1990s with their horrifying crimes. They seemed like a picture-perfect couple, but their relationship hid unspeakable evil. It all started in 1990 when Carla's younger sister, Tammy, tragically died. What seemed like a terrible accident was later revealed to be a crime. Tammy had been drugged and assaulted by Paul and Carla, but it didn't stop there. In 1991 and 1992, they kidnapped, tortured, and killed two teenage girls, Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French. These crimes were brutal, calculated, and left the entire country horrified. Paul was later linked to a series of assaults in Scarborough, Ontario. DNA evidence tied him to these attacks and the murders of Leslie and Kristen. Carla struck a controversial plea deal, claiming she was forced to help Paul. She got 12 years in prison in exchange for her testimony, but then videotapes emerged showing her full involvement, sparking outrage. Paul was sentenced to life in prison and deemed a dangerous offender, meaning he's unlikely to ever get out. Carla served her time and was released in 2005, but her past continues to follow her.
What this man did to his wives was truly horrifying. In 1975, a man named Mark S. Mann had a shop where he made lifelike dolls and sold them for a living. Wealthy women would flock to his shop, enchanted by his charm. They'd fall in love and they would marry, but then they would disappear. His workshop in the basement held 8 glass cases with 8 beautiful dolls in them. One day, he managed to persuade a woman named Chloe Noalot to be his newest wife. 3 days after their marriage, Chloe noticed something the others didn't. The dolls weren't just wearing wedding dresses, they were wearing his missing wives' actual wedding dresses. In his diary, she found his darkest secret. He wasn't just making dolls that looked like his wives, he was turning his wives into dolls. The process took exactly 13 days. The screams lasted for 12. Chloe managed to call and inform the police about her twisted husband, but when police raided his workshop, they found his final project unfinished, a doll with Chloe's face only half transformed. But Chloe had left him a gift too, handcuffs. Now Mark rots in prison, surrounded by blank-faced mannequins, and his dolls are in police storage. The last thing he had to say was, "I love beautiful women, but I love them more when they are quiet."
Hammer coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
So I found this little basement. It's freaking weird. Oh my god!
Yes? Hello? What is that? Who are you? I'm not gonna hurt you. Leave my lights alone.
I was forced into street prostitution, and what I received in return was my death. I grew up in an orphanage until I turned 15. I was told to leave the orphanage because they had an age restriction. I faced a harsh survival game, with no money, no family, and my friends in similar circumstances. I didn't know why I was born, what my purpose in life was, and why I had to endure so much suffering. When you're at the bottom of society and have no control over your own life, it is normal to be deceived or forced into doing things you don't want to do. Becoming homeless and addicted to drugs, I was forced into street prostitution. No one wants to do this kind of work, but those demons in human form won't spare you and let you free. My life took a new turn when I was proposed to by a familiar client. I was truly touched because he didn't pay attention to my past or my occupation. However, it wasn't as fortunate and happy as I had thought. He turned out to be a drug addict, constantly beating and treating me like a puppet to satisfy his desires. True love only came to me when I had my son. My child was the most sacred and precious thing God had given me. Because of my son, who was the only one who could be by my side, I gained the strength to fight against this world full of nightmares. To ensure my son's safety, I decided to leave that drug-addicted husband and quit that job, transitioning to work as a hostess at a club. I tried to start over so that my son could be proud of his mother, but everything was never easy. The lives of me and my son became more and more difficult and stagnant. I was so desperate for money that I resorted to stealing from a customer, and I paid my life for that mistake. After being caught, I returned the entire amount I took, but I was forced to pay a large sum as compensation for the loss. In a dire financial situation, I couldn't pay that unreasonable amount immediately, so I begged them to let me repay the debt gradually. However, the result was being imprisoned by them. They had intended to make money off of me by inviting
10 terrifying true crime facts if you live in Arkansas. Arkansas is a place of deep woods, silent highways, and long-forgotten secrets. The crimes here are not just stories. They are real, chilling, and unsolved. Some killers were never caught, some victims were never found, and some nightmares never end. If you live in Arkansas, beware, because in this state, the shadows are watching. 1. The Fouke Monster Murders. More than a legend? Deep in the woods of Fouke, Arkansas, people whisper about a creature, half man, half beast, stalking the back roads. But what's worse than the legend? The disappearances. For decades, people have vanished near Boggy Creek. Hunters, hikers, even entire families. Some were found, mutilated, torn apart, as if something had been feeding on them. Authorities blame wild animals. Locals know better. 2. The Nightmare on 65, the Highway of Death. U.S. Highway 65 runs through Arkansas, but for years people have gone missing along its path. Some were found weeks later, dead in ditches. Others, never seen again. One woman's car was discovered still running on the roadside, doors wide open. Her purse was inside. She wasn't. She was never found. 3. The Gurdon Light, a murder that never left. Near the old railroad tracks in Gurdon, Arkansas, a mysterious floating light has appeared for decades. Some say it's a ghostly warning. Others say it's a killer's curse. In 1931, a railroad worker was murdered with an axe on those very tracks. His head was never found. Now people claim the light is his lantern, searching for his missing skull. But sometimes, the light moves toward you. The Texarkana Moonlight Murders, the Phantom Killer. In 1946, a masked man terrorized Texarkana, attacking couples parked on Lover's Lane. He stabbed, shot, and bludgeoned his victims, always disappearing into the night. The town lived in fear for months. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he vanished. The police never caught him. Some believe he still walks among us. 5. The Ozark disappearances. Where do they go? The Ozark National Forest is breathtakingly beautiful, but terrifyingly deadly. Hikers have vanished without a trace, their bodies never recovered. Others have been found days later, confused, lost, unable to explain where they'd been. One man claimed he saw something watching him from the trees. Then he was gone. 6. The Little Rock Slasher, a killer who vanished between 2020 and 2021. A serial killer stalked the streets of Little Rock, attacking victims with a knife. The killer struck at random, choosing people who were walking alone. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. No suspect was ever caught. The case remains open. Is he still out there, waiting to kill again? 7. The Devil's Den Murders, a park with a past. Devil's Den State Park is known for disappearances. Hikers enter the woods and never come back. One couple's bodies were found months later, miles from where they vanished. Their bones were picked clean. Some believe a predator is hunting in the park. Others say it's something else. 8. The Boone County Hitchhiker, a ride to nowhere. In the 1980s, drivers along Highway 65 reported picking up a woman in white. She was soaking wet, shivering, and when asked where she was going, she always whispered, "Home." But when they reached town, she was gone. Then, police uncovered an old murder case, a woman who disappeared in a storm decades earlier. Her body was never found. 9. The Mystery of Melissa Witt, gone in an instant. In 1994, Melissa Witt vanished from a Fort Smith parking lot. Her car keys were left in the ignition. Her blood was found nearby. Months later, her body was discovered deep in the woods. But her killer, never caught. And some say he's still hunting. 10. The Boggy Creek Murders, a killer in the swamp. A string of disappearances in rural Arkansas has never been explained. Bodies washed up in rivers, showing signs of strangulation and mutilation. Some were never found at all. Locals say a drifter, known only as the Swamp Man, may be responsible, but no one ever proved he existed. Or maybe he was never caught. A final warning. Arkansas is beautiful but dangerous. The crimes here are real. Some killers were never caught, some bodies were never found, and some are still out there. If you live in Arkansas, watch your back, because here the darkness watches too.
Them up by a rope tied to the wrists, typically resulting in dislocated shoulders. Weights may have been added to the body to intensify the effect and increase the pain. This kind of torture would generally not last more than an hour without rest, as it would otherwise likely result in death. White room torture, a method where the victim is placed in a completely white, soundproof room with no windows or distinguishing features. It was used as a long-form psychological torture method and often caused people to go crazy. Oubliette dungeon, a type of dungeon designed as a deep pit used to hold prisoners. Forgotten and left in the dark, victims would be dropped through a narrow opening, often to be ignored and left to die without food or water, hence the name from the French oublier, meaning to forget. Gibbeting human cages, a method of public execution and post-mortem punishment, where the body, sometimes still alive, was placed in a metal cage and hung on display, usually in a popular area. This served as a warning to others and subjected the victim to a slow, humiliating death. Spanish tickler, a terrifying instrument designed to rip and tear flesh from the body.